Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Marcia.
And we like World War II media and we want to talk about it.
Welcome back, everybody, to Rosie the Reviewer. Today we are covering a movie called Land of Mine, which came out in 2015. It is a Danish movie, so it also has a Danish title, which is Under Sandet, which means under the sand. And it's written and directed by a Danish director called Martin Zandvliet. And in case you're wondering, that is a Dutch last name. It's a Dutch dad, apparently. So he's half Dutch, which makes me happy. This movie was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Academy Awards. It did not win, which upsets me. And it follows a small fictional unit of German POWs who are forced to clear landmines from Denmark's beaches toward the end of the war. Well, after the end of the war. So, it's not a cheerful movie, but I'll start with you, Sam. What did you think of the movie?
Well, it's visually a beautiful film. The landscape is so stark and beautiful and made deadly by people, of course. You're seeing these vast expanses of beaches and you know what's lurking there underneath the sand, as the Danish title alludes to. And I think they did a really good job of tackling these ideas of like Denmark obviously coming out of a few years of German occupation, and they're obviously feeling some kind of way about the German POWs they have and are putting to work to remove these mines. And the main Danish character gets to grapple with this question of like, it's really easy to hate an idea or an idea of a person, but when someone is standing in front of you that you've gotten to know, then it's much more difficult to just, hate that person. And he gets to see these teenage boys who are being made to run the gauntlet here. It's like, is this what justice looks like? Like, how exactly is this quelling my anger to take part in this? And so I think it was a really lovely, really gripping movie. If you look at it, I guess in sort of broad strokes, nothing much quote unquote happens, but I really, really enjoyed it. This is going to be one of the ones that I rate really highly, I think. What about you?
Well, what can I say after you've already said all that? It is a very visually appealing movie, you're right. Like, it's bright and colorful. Even though it takes place on a beach, they've managed to put a whole lot of color in there, just in the color grading. I guess that's kind of technical. But I listened to an interview with the director and writer of this, and he said he was asked about his inspirations for this movie and said they weren't World War II films that he looked at, but he looked at great character pieces, which makes sense if you then see this movie. Like, all these characters have feelings and you can see them express them, and it's a character movie for sure, and I like that very much. It is sad also, but not devastatingly sad, so it's not like you're never gonna get over this movie. He also said something else that I thought was interesting about he made a choice to show us these young people, which there were in these mine clearing squadrons. There were children, not specifically as many in one squadron as we see them here, but there were enough to stand out to this guy that he thought, well, I'm gonna tell this story through these kids. Also because these weren't adults at all when the war started, so can you really blame them even for participating in this war? So it adds another extra layer of, I guess, questioning whether you can hate them at all because they're children, and I don't know, it just raises a load of questions that I find really engaging and interesting. And the acting was good too, I quite enjoyed it. So I'm also gonna rate this highly, I already know.
Yeah, just for our casual history listeners, we have talked about this before about how at the end of the war, Germany started to run low on manpower. And so a lot of the units that were raised towards the end were a lot of men who previously would have been deemed too young or too old to serve. So you definitely had a lot of Allied soldiers remarking on the fact that the groups of Germans they were coming across toward the end of the war certainly were quite a bit younger, quite a bit older than they were expecting.
Yeah. And I don't think we've seen a Danish movie before, have we?
No, I don't think so. This would be our first.
Exactly. I don't think there are very many, so I think we've picked a very good first one. I don't think we're gonna get many more that are like this and that are this good. So I would definitely recommend everybody to go and watch it. You have to look for it on several platforms. It wasn't available for free for me, so have a browse around. I rented this movie. I think it's worth the rent. If you're not opposed to spending money on a film, it's worth it. So please go and check it out.
One thing I do wanna get out of the way at the top is that I think the title Land of Mine is such an unserious pun for a serious movie. I was like, okay," when I saw that title.
Unlike you, I thought it was kind of interesting. But I guess there's a different strokes for different folks. I think with that, we should get into the plot.
Denmark, May 1945. There's an opening card that says, 5 years of German occupation has ended. Then we encounter Sergeant Karl Leopold Rasmussen, played by Roland Muller, and he, we'll call it, expresses the Danish attitude toward their vanquished occupiers. There's a group of German POWs marching past, and he takes out his anger on them. Essentially, he beats one of them up for having a Danish flag and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought you put that really politely there. Literally, the opening does not pull any punches. I'm sorry for the terrible pun. I realized when I started watching this movie that I knew nothing about Denmark in World War II. Like, absolutely nothing. So, this was kind of an interesting journey of discovery for me, even though the war's already ended at this point.
Yeah. So Denmark declared itself neutral at the outbreak of war, but that did not last very long. They were occupied by Germany as of April 1940 as a stepping stone to invading Norway, essentially. And they had their own government still in place for the first couple of years there. But starting in 1943, it started to become clear that the Germans were losing the war. The Germans were talking about rounding up the Danish Jewish population. So there were a number of things that occurred that caused civil unrest to increase and resistance to increase to the Nazi occupation. And at that point, the Nazis tried to pressure the government into reprisals, essentially, and the government refused to do that. So they stepped down. And at that point, a full German military occupation occurred.
Yeah, no fun. 2.2 million mines were laid on the beaches of western Denmark by the Germans. If you recall, this was part of the Atlantic Wall. Like, there's also a lot of mines, for example, in Holland on the beaches. There's also, similar to the events of this movie, the same kind of happened in the Netherlands. But 2.2 million mines, that's really quite a lot. But why are there so many, you might ask? The Germans thought that there might be an Allied invasion in Denmark, but it never came. And at the end of the war, and in this movie, the German POWs are now tasked with the cleanup of all those mines that they so carefully put there. And in the movie, we are introduced to the group of young German POWs who will be there to clean up the mines, and they are the principal characters in the film. We see them being trained to defuse different types of mines. And in case you were wondering when it was gonna happen, the first death happens during their training.
Yeah, the scene where they have been trained on how to defuse the mines and then they're being sent one by one into this sandbagged room to diffuse their first real mine. And they're going in one after the other. And they certainly don't spare you, where you see a couple and then it's done. It's like you watch like boy after boy after boy go in there to diffuse a mine and you're just climbing the walls. It's so tense.
Yeah, and I thought this was really, to be honest, I don't really know exactly what happened because there's one boy who's really nervous and you think he's not going to be able to defuse the mine, you think he's going to fail, and then he comes out and another boy walks in, and that's when there's an explosion. You're like, wait, did he defuse the mine or did just another mine explode? Which I think is what happened. They leave it sort of in the middle, I think.
Yeah, it could also be that, the last guy took so long and the CO was getting so irritated that the guy who went after was like almost overconfident. He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get it done quickly." And then, obviously not a thing that you can rush.
What I liked about that too is that when you're kind of shown every single boy taking apart the mine and putting the different parts into different containers outside But when the boy that was so nervous came out, they don't show you what he's doing entirely, so it's blocked by someone else as you're watching it, so it's purposely made a little bit confusing and mysterious.
When the German forces in Denmark surrendered to the Allies on May 4th, 1945, one of the terms of the surrender was that, quote unquote, the German command is to carry out at once and without argument or comment all further orders that will be issued by the Allied powers on any subject. So it was on that basis that approximately 2,000 German POWs were assigned to the task of demining Denmark's west coast. And to circumvent the Geneva Convention, which dictated that prisoners shouldn't be doing dangerous labor, the soldiers chosen for demining duty were designated surrendered enemy personnel rather than prisoners of war because prisoner of war is a protected status. You're guaranteed certain rights. And so they were forced to clear both anti-tank and anti-personnel mines using extremely dangerous manual methods. And their difficulties were compounded by the movement of the sand in the sea. As you can imagine, the tides would move mines around. They did actually have pretty detailed maps that the Germans had made of where the mines were, but as you can imagine, over a couple of years, the sand would shift. Sometimes the mines would be buried like a meter and a half under the sand. So a huge job and a difficult job.
Definitely. And if I'm not mistaken, these clear up duties were set up by the British mostly in Denmark, but with a Danish overseer, which is what happens in this movie as well. And it's such an interesting thing to think about when the Danish have been occupied by Germany and have probably suffered under their occupation a lot. To then be put in charge of the people that have hurt them seems to be a really like tight situation, like a tightrope situation even. I wonder how many times that has gone wrong. That's all.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, like many countries under Nazi occupation during World War II, there was a Danish Nazi party and there were Danish collaborators. On the other hand, there was also a pretty organized Danish resistance. I mean, Denmark was able to rescue almost all of their Jewish population by this organized movement that got them out and sent them to Sweden. And so, yeah, there obviously and there would have been quite strong feelings probably of these Danish soldiers put in charge of these German POWs, and like you say, I'm sure they didn't always treat them well, and we see a little bit of that in this movie.
In the director's interview that I saw, he said that this topic is a very sensitive topic in Denmark. I think it still is, and I think it is in the Netherlands too, because while they classify these details as not being POWs anymore, they effectively did break the Geneva Convention. They just gave them another name and were like, well, I guess now we can get away from it. But if you think about it, it's just inhumane what you're doing. You're putting these men who've like surrendered at this point under enormous amount of stress and danger. Like it's not just the actual danger of dying, it's also the constant stress that you're under while you're doing this job. Like it's really inhumane.
Yeah, for sure. You're taking out something on these people that they didn't necessarily have any involvement in. I mean, one of the fascinating things about mines as a weapon of modern war, I mean, there were mines before, like 100 years ago, but really World War One was the first time, they were developing explosive anti-tank mines and that kind of stuff. And it's a weapon where when you bury it, you loose the blow effectively, but you have no idea where it's going to land. And it could be months or years later. It's a blind killer. You have no
Yeah.
idea who's going to be on the other end of it. And it's an interesting thing to think about separating yourself from the act of killing in that way. One of the things that I think the global community has learned over the past 100 years is that it's very easy to bury a landmine, not so easy to get rid of them.
No.
And often they long outlast the conflicts during which they were buried, and the people who bear the brunt are children and farmers and whoever accidentally stumbles across them.
In my research for this movie, I also found that it's a Dutch example, but they still find around 50 mines every single year in the Netherlands from World War II still. Like, some of these mines are still here.
Yeah, and they regularly dig up mines from World War One in France and Belgium still. It's like a weekly occurrence. And the older these weapons get, like, the longer they've been left in the ground, the more they get corroded and unstable.
Yeah. I remember a couple weeks ago they found I don't remember what kind of artillery thing it was or a bomb maybe, but in the UK and they had to like evacuate an entire village just to get rid of this thing. It's probably a bomb dropped from a plane, would be my guess. But imagine we're 80 years on now and yet we can still feel the repercussions of World War II today. It's wild.
Yeah. It's really one of those weapons where, people do not act responsibly,
No,
Sergeant Rasmussen takes charge of the group as they begin their task on the beach. He promises them that if they can defuse 6 mines per hour each, they will have removed 45,000 mines at the end of 3 months, at which point they will be allowed to go home. And this is the promise that really drives these guys. They're like, we just got to make it to the end. And often more mines were cleared daily in Denmark, 9,715 per day at the high point in summer of 1945 than annually in countries today. Because there are still countries that are quite heavily mined and they are not making the kind of progress that was being made in 1945. And this is partially owing to an attitude of acceptable casualties. If you're making German POWs do it, you're happy for them to use rudimentary, potentially dangerous methods, but also because the Germans kept extremely good maps of where the mines were located. Even governments today who have the capacity to do this digitally are not keeping as good records as the Germans were doing. And so German POWs also cleared mines in the Netherlands, as you say, and in France.
I feel like Germany in general has a record of keeping good records of their crimes. Like all their war crimes too. It's pretty well documented.
It's true. Well, and in this case, it really, came in handy because they were able to, as we see in the movie, they would be like, yeah, in this square mile, we know this many mines are buried. So if we can find and dig up the number of mines that are in the record, we can be pretty certain that we've cleared this area.
And just to give you an idea, because obviously you might not have seen this movie, but just imagine a really long, really wide beach. And at the beginning of the movie, they're just told, look, there's a shit ton of mines all over this beach. And it's as far as they can see. So this would have been a really not very motivating outlook for these boys. Like, I looked at that and I was like, wait, that just feels kind of hopeless and endless to me.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I also wonder about our sergeant, because he's been through the occupation. He's in the middle of fucking nowhere on some beach by himself with only his dog. Does he even want to be here or does he want to go somewhere else?
Right. I mean, you gotta assume he probably wants to go home too.
So I set myself up for this. This is a note with all the character names in it and all the actor names. So bear with me. So the main characters, our main POWs are Sebastian Schumann, played by Louis Hoffmann, Helmut Moorbach, played by Joel Bassmann, Ludwig Hafke, played by Oskar Bokelmann, Ernst Lessner, played by Emil Belton, and Werner Lessner, which is his twin brother, played by Oskar Belton. Also twins in the movie, indistinguishable almost, Rodolph Sauker, played by August Carter, and Wilhelm Leburn, played by Leon Seidel.
Yes, and if you've seen the TV show Dark, then you've seen Louis Hoffman before. He plays the main character.
Oh, that's where I know him from. I've not seen the TV show, but I've seen the trailer. So that's why he looked familiar to me. And he's kind of our main guy, I guess, within this troop too. So Sebastian quickly differentiates himself as the leader of the group, and most of the boys come across as very young, and they're kind of innocently discussing what they're gonna do when they get home. And the older boys are kind of looking at this a little cynically. Like you can tell that they know, wait, maybe we shouldn't be talking about going home just yet.
Yeah, the innocence in the two twins there who are obviously young teenagers. They're talking about how they're both bricklayers and when they get home they're going to start a company where they do that as a profession because Germany's been so badly damaged by the war that it will need people to rebuild.
You know what happens to people who talk about going home, right?
Yeah. Oh man.
These twins, these actors, were I think they were 15 when this was filmed, so they were actually really young. which I think is good because they look like absolute children, and you're like, oh god, they're not gonna live, are they?
Right, and these characters don't even remember when Hitler came to power. Like,
No.
this is the end result of, all of this conflict is that you end up with a group of, like, little boys who are excited to go home and rebuild their country. Ernst, who's one of the twin brothers, he befriends the daughter of a local farmer named Elizabeth, and she's played by Zoe Zamdliet, who's the daughter of the director. It's a bit cynical. He befriends her so he can steal bread from her, but the POWs are not given much food. They talk about how they haven't eaten in days. Obviously, German POWs are not a priority in a country like Denmark that's trying to recover from the war. The boys soon become ill from eating contaminated grain that Helmut has stolen from the farm, and they are forced to work despite their illness. Rasmussen does not have a lot of sympathy for them, and because of this, Wilhelm accidentally detonates a mine. He's throwing up while he's trying to defuse this mine. It's brutal. He dies soon after in the hospital, but Sergeant Rasmussen, I think, has a perhaps an inkling of sympathy for the boys because he reassures them that Wilhelm will recover.
So Rasmussen does actually go to the farmer to see what's happened. And the farmer lady, one of the boys has stolen this like food from the farm. And the farmer lady tells Rasmussen that it's like riddled with red droppings, so it will make them sick, which is why they're sick. And this Danish lady says, well, I guess I got some Germans after all then. Like, she's really angry with the Germans, as for many people, obviously, but these are kids. It's really difficult to hate kids this much. But she does. She's like, guess I got them.
Rasmussen effectively treats their food poisoning by making them drink seawater so they throw up a whole bunch and get it out of their system.
And following that, while he initially had very little sympathy for them, he begins to see them even as they're sick as human. So, not wanting them to get sick again, he steals some food for them, which results in his CO, Captain Ebbe Jensen, played by Mikkel Bo Filsgaard. He retaliates by bringing a group of British soldiers to the boys at the farm and brutally abuse them and mistreat them. And Jensen, you can tell he has a different sort of approach than Rasmussen because Rasmussen kind of intervenes and stops it from happening. But you can tell that Jensen really hates this boys.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough to watch because it's like the British soldiers are like roughing up this kid and like peeing on him, and you can understand the anger from their part, but it's just so pitiful of a sight.
And also, one of the other boys, the one that is kind of taking charge of some of the other ones, tries to stop it, and then they put a gun to his head, which is when Rasmussen actually intervenes and is like, no, wait, I need these boys. But you can tell that he not only needs them, he also cares for them a little bit.
One day, the boys discover that some of the mines are booby trapped to prevent manual diffusing. They try to warn one another, but it's so kind of windy and loud on the beach that Werner doesn't hear, and he's killed when a double mine detonates in his hands. His twin brother Ernst is destroyed by his death. He's in such shock that he doesn't seem to have understand what's happened, and it's obvious that Rasmussen really takes it to heart too.
Yeah, and apparently this explosion was so bad that there's really no sign of Werner anymore. Like, he's no longer on the beach. He's just evaporated in the explosion. And this poor boy, man, he just keeps saying, I have to go look for my brother. We have to go look for him. It's so sad.
Yeah. The Germans were innovators in mine technology. Some examples include anti tank mines known as Teller mines, and those are the flat, round ones that we see them are diffusing quite often in the film. These wouldn't typically detonate under a person's weight, but they were specifically designed to destroy tank tracks. So a tank would roll over them and it would blow up and destroy the track. But they figured that wasn't doing quite enough damage. So what you could also do is you could modify it to detonate on a delay, and you would attach a rod to it that would be hidden in the vegetation or the rubble or what have you. And as the tank rolled forward, the front of the tank would nudge the rod and it would set off this delayed explosion. So the mine would go off as the tank was rolling over the mine. It would blow up into the soft underbelly of the mine and it would maim or kill the crew as well.
How fun.
Yeah.
Jeez.
In the film, we also see wooden mines. They're kind of shaped like boxes, wherein the only metal part was the detonator, and this was to remain concealed from rudimentary metal detectors. And the most common German anti personnel mine was known as the Bouncing Betty because it would be propelled up off the ground and explode at 3 to 5 feet in the air. So if you can imagine, if you're in a group of, you're out with their like on a patrol or something with your unit, this mine would jump up into the air and spray shrapnel all around, so it would be able to maim or kill a lot more than just the guy who stepped on it. So really your only shot after you stepped on it was to hit the deck and hope that the shrapnel went over you. And oftentimes I think in movies you see we saw this in Monuments Men, I think, where someone steps on a mine and as long as they maintain pressure on the mine, it doesn't blow up. And that's not how mines work in real life. And so the way that we see mines behave in this movie is a lot more accurate. And these bouncing Betty mines, those are the ones that look like a tin can with a stick poking out. We also see those in the movie a little bit. And sometimes mines were rigged to prevent manual diffusing. The stacked trap that we see in the film was in common use. This is where you would have a mine on top and it would be rigged to another mine underneath. So even if you defuse the mine on top and you try to pull it out of the ground, it would pull on the mine on the bottom and that one would blow up in your hands.
Two new boys join the group to replace the ones that were killed, and they come to the group on a day off when the boys are playing football with Rasmussen on the beach, and you can tell that he's kind of warm to them a little and even enjoys their company. And they're just out there just having a football game, and then as they walk back, Rasmussen's dog runs off into an area after I think someone throws a ball, maybe it's even Rasmussen himself, but this area has already been cleared, and then we hear an explosion, and the dog has been killed by a mine. And this sets off Rasmussen, who just kind of grunts like this boys, into absolutely hating them again because he feels like his kindness has been thrown back in his face. And he responds by forcing the boys to walk arm in arm across every cleared area to confirm that it's safe.
Yeah, which is grim, right? Because if the boys have miscounted the mines, which is possible because there's so many of them, or if the Germans missed one on their map, or if, some other thing happened that there's still mines in the ground, like making these guys do this is there's a reason why it's a war crime, right? But
Yeah.
apparently this practice of marching in close order over land to prove that it was clear happened quite often in post-war Europe. And they would sometimes invite the local population to come down and watch, as in, like, "Here, we're just gonna prove that this land is actually clear." And apparently, organizations that clear landmines today do the same thing. So they'll clear an area, and then they'll host a football game on the area so that the local population can see that, the people who removed the mines are vouching and guaranteeing for the safety of the area.
Imagine it not being quite clear. Oh
Yeah.
man. The dying of this dog actually is it's really sad, but it really works in this movie because this is the boys like the dog. Rasmussen has no we see no other family that he might have them, but we don't see them. So this dog is like his companion, and then the dog dies, and you're like, oh shit! And you can just feel it coming that he's gonna take it out on these boys, and he does. And it just breaks my heart.
Yeah. When the dog got blown up, I was like, "No, not the dog!"
The dog is innocent,
Yeah, yeah. Something, the dog is a metaphor.
probably.
The farmer's daughter, the little girl that we mentioned earlier, goes out to play in an uncleared area because she's little. She doesn't understand the signage, stay off the beach. So her mother, Karen, played by Laura Bro, begs the POWs to rescue her. It's no longer a thing of like, oh, we hate the Germans. We don't talk to them. We don't deal with them. She's like, I need someone to help me. So Sebastian starts to clear a path towards the little girl. Obviously, it's pretty slow going. And Ernst, whose twin brother has died, he's no longer concerned about his own death. He just walks straight across this mined area to sit with the little girl and calm her down. Kind of a callback to earlier when he befriended her and stole her bread. And when Sebastian arrives across the safe path, he carries the little girl to safety, but Ernst has, this grief is world ending for him. He's still a young man, and when you're that age, everything feels like it's the end of the world. And he essentially dies by suicide as he walks further into the minefield, and of course, inevitably steps on a mine.
The imagery for the scene was rough, man. You knew it was going to happen. You just knew it was gonna happen, but still, like, they like zoom out and give you a wide shot of him walking away into the field, and you're like, oh god, no, don't do it, stay. He's just lost his twin, and with his twin, also, I think his future. So it's poor boy, and poor everyone else too. It's just horrible.
Yeah. It just really impresses on you how young they are. You know,
Yeah.
he doesn't have the emotional capacity to come back from that, which, you know, begs the question, should he have gone to war in the first place? Should he have been sent to war in the first place?
The answer is no.
Right.
Yeah. So this whole ordeal seems to like affect everybody quite badly. So Rasmussen kind of puts away his hatred for them again and reassures Sebastian that they will soon be able to go home. Not long after, some of the boys are away from the beach and they are loading the diffused mines onto a truck. And turns out you could kind of wait for it again. One of the mines was not diffused properly, and since it's on the truck, it sets off a massive explosion, and there is no one left alive from those boys. But the other four are on the beach, defusing under mines. So they see the explosion happen, and so does Rasmussen, and they just all run back. But the boys who remain are Sebastian, Ludwig, Helmut, and Rodolph.
Yeah. So they started out with 14, I think, and there are 4 left alive at this point.
Yeah.
Jensen, that's our CO who, you know, Rasmussen's boss. He sends the surviving boys, because now they have experience with diffusing mines, to join a team who are diffusing mines in another area. And this is despite Rasmussen's earlier promise that they will be allowed to go home. And Jensen almost seems to be doing this to punish Rasmussen for daring to have compassion for these boys. And as much as Rasmussen begs him to, he refuses to change his mind.
The thing this movie does is, I think Jensen is younger than Rasmussen too, so it's this strange power dynamic between these two. And they obviously have different feelings about these boys. I think it's quite brave of the director to make the main character, in this case Rasmussen, have an arc that's not linear. Like it goes up and down a little bit, his arc. Like he hates them, then he befriends them, then he hates them again, and then his compassion grows again. And I don't think we see that very often in movies. I thought it was an interesting take.
Yeah, for sure. And you really get this idea really beautifully articulated of like, here at the end of the war in this isolated place, they're just people. You know, it's like he is a person and they are people, and whatever ideas and principles drove the conflict that just ended, they are in this together. And it's really difficult for him, who's with them day to day, to maintain this distance and this aloofness. Like it's really difficult.
For sure. And another really powerful scene I thought happened slightly earlier after one of the twins just dies, and he kind of cradles the other one, the one who remains at that point still. Like he's a son, like it feels really intimate. Obviously this boy's really like shocked and upset, and he's given him, I think, some morphine to calm down, so he's off his head on morphine. But it's this really human thing that I don't think he even expected to feel for this boy in that way. It just breaks my heart. This entire movie breaks my heart.
When the twin who remains is high on the morphine and he's obviously been dealt this devastating blow of his brother's death, he's saying to Rasmussen, please don't hate him. Please don't hate my brother. And it's just a gut punch, you know, just such a terrible situation.
Yeah, and all I can think about when thinking about that scene is that the next morning he's gonna wake up and realize that his brother is in fact no longer alive. And he's still in captivity. It's just heartbreaking. These are boys, man. I wish this never happened. I mean, I wish all wars never happened, but that's literally wishful thinking.
The people who end up being held accountable are rarely the ones who deserve to be held accountable, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. Unfortunately, it's so true. Rasmussen takes it upon himself to rescue the boys. They've been brought to Skallia Peninsula, which is another part of Denmark where there's a bunch of mines. I'll have some more information about that in a second. But the chances of them dying there are even bigger than where they were before because there's no map of these mines. They have to go in blind. So they're like, good luck. And it's like on a peninsula and the ebb and the flow is really bad. So it's really just horrible. So he takes it upon himself to go and save them. And he kind of picks them up and pulls them out of their near detail and drives them to within 500 meters of the German border and sets them free. And I was like, yay! Finally, something good is happening for these boys. But then you look at them and you're like, there's only four of them left. Everybody else is dead. So it's a sort of a happy ending. But at the same time, you're like, for the four who remained, like so many of them have died already.
Yeah, and they're obviously going back to a country too that is, probably not the country that they remember, and it's gonna be a bit of an uphill slog. But I do like this brief moment of this is just a moment between a small group of humans. This guy decided that what was being done wasn't right, and these people that he had grown to know and have compassion for, he figured that at this point, these boys dying for this cause, this is not going to fix what happened. And so he did show empathy and compassion towards them. And when the boys are running towards the German border and Sebastian, who's been the leader of the boys effectively this whole time, turns around briefly and looks at Rasmussen, and you know that these guys are never gonna see each other again. But yeah, and they just share this like brief, powerful moment of like these are people, and the decision was made to like end the cycle of violence effectively. I don't know. It's a really lovely ending.
Yeah, and I like too that we don't get to know what happens to these boys. Like this is where we last see them running into like a tree line of the border, and we don't know if they get home safe. And I like that though. It feels hopeful for sure.
Yeah, and this movie doesn't have anything to say about like we don't really know about their wartime service. We don't know what they did during the war. One of the boys, Helmet, is wearing an SS uniform. The movie does not delve into that. These are not the questions that we're trying to ask and answer here. It's really just a movie about, it's very narrow in scope. It's like, here are the people in this situation, and here is how they react, and here is how they develop, a shared humanity with one another. We get an end card that says, after the war, more than 2,000 German POWs were forced to remove over 1.5 million landmines from the west coast of Denmark. Almost half of them died or were severely injured. Many of them were just young boys.
Yeah, it's a good end card. I think it just reminds you that ultimately these people didn't deserve to die in this way because they were POWs and they shouldn't have been forced to do this work. But then what's the alternative? Like, what else can you do? Someone has to do it. But what moral obligation do you have to these people who are still people in the end and the war's over? So what they did is not moral, it's amoral, but there's no real good answer to this problem that they have, honestly.
Yeah, and I don't know that the movie wants these questions to be definitively answered. Like, it's
No,
just yeah.
it's telling a point of view of a Danish man and of these kids who didn't really know any better. At least we think they don't know any better. Maybe some of them did. That's the interesting thing about the fact that we don't know anything about their time before this movie. And I think it makes it really powerful to not know anything about them.
I think too, like, this idea of whether or not people have to earn empathy and compassion, whether or not Rasmussen treats them well, it's about his character and it's about his decisions. And, whether or not he treats them well, does that change anything that happened in the war? Does that help him address his anger? Does that, so yeah, I don't know. It's super interesting, but like obviously we don't have to have those answers. Like we don't have to firmly, you know.
No, it's nice that it makes you wonder though, doesn't it? That it makes you think about it. And I think it's impossible to answer, to be very honest with you. I don't think there is an answer to these questions specifically. I looked up a little bit about the last place they were sent to in the movie, which was the Skallinger Peninsula, south of Bløfland, or Bløfland, I think it's pronounced. I'm sorry, I'm not Danish. But officially, the mine clearing was completed on October 1st, 1945, but a few fields remained, including the one on the Skallinger Peninsula, where a field of approximately 18,000 mines was abandoned because it was too dangerous to take them out. And apparently, the last mines were cleared in 2021, and that's when the area was declared safe again. So it took them a long time to take all the mines out of that place.
Yeah, I have some notes.
Yeah, notes. Go, give me notes.
The Geneva Conventions were updated in 1949 as a result of what happened at the end of World War II. And so it had always been against the rules for a prisoner of war to be forced to do dangerous labor. The Allied nations considered it a bit open to interpretation. And so they specifically amended the wording to refer to the removal of mines. So the new convention reads, unless he be a volunteer, no prisoner of war may be employed on labor which is of an unhealthy or dangerous nature. The removal of mines or similar devices shall be considered as dangerous labor. On the first day of filming, the production team located a real World War II mine on the beach, and they had to call in a Danish bomb squad to deactivate it.
The director talked about this in his interview. He said, this was really lucky that we found this mine because it created a sense of tension for the rest of the shoot within the boys that there could be mines anywhere. So the acting that they're doing is, even though it was safe, like there was military around them at all times and like they made sure it was safe, it reminded them that it could be dangerous and they felt that danger.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've talked about mines a little bit before. We talked about the efforts to remove mines in Japanese waters in our Godzilla Minus One episode. And though Denmark's demining efforts were largely successful in the immediate aftermath of World War II, the mines continued to present a danger. Egypt remains one of the most heavily mined places on Earth because of the Western Desert Campaign fought in the early part of the war. Obviously, quite a lot of that territory was fought over, wrested back and forth by the British and the German troops, and quite extensively mined. And 8,000 people have died running across mines in the Egyptian desert since 1945.
Oops, that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I think there was a period of time where the Egyptian government, it just wasn't really a priority because that the people who live in those areas tend to be like nomadic. There's not like a large population living in the desert. And so I think in recent years there's been a little bit more of an effort to actually eradicate mines, but it's still a major issue.
And that's it. I think for the movie, we need to rate it. But before we rate it, I would like to remind you that you can follow us on Spotify or Apple or Amazon or wherever the frick you listen to your podcast. And you can rate us 5 stars or write a review. Or you can send this episode to a friend. What happens?
Every time you send this episode to a friend, a beautiful soaring shot of the stark Danish beach is filmed for our viewing pleasure.
I like that. So please send this episode to a friend so we can get more of those shots. Speaking of rating, what could we possibly rate this out of? It's such a serious movie.
Rat poop in the grain out of 10?
Sure.
How many rat poops in the grain out of 10 would you rate this movie?
I would rate this movie probably 9 red pips in the grain out of 10. I think this was a fantastic movie. It's sort of a quiet movie. There's not a whole lot of sweeping music in it, like the actual events of the movie kind of speaks for themselves. And the acting was good by phenomenal young actors and by Rasmussen. I thought he was good. I've already forgotten his name. I'm very sorry. But I was kind of surprised by this movie. It caught me off guard a little bit. I was afraid I would find it kind of slow, but it's not slow, even though very little happens in it. So, yeah, a really high rating for me. How about for you?
Yeah, me too. I'm going to give this one a crazy high rating. I'm going to rate this 9 rat poops in the grain out of 10. As you mentioned earlier, I think it was really beautifully acted. And I think a part of that is the real authenticity. These actors are young. They're not well-known Hollywood names. I think that the actor who played Rasmussen, the main Danish character, he was just brilliant as well. Just really gorgeous and lovely to see the evolution of these characters. I think really solid script as well, really well paced. Like we said before, really visually stunning movie. I was saying I wish I could make GIFs because I would just, I would make so many GIFs of this movie and force it into people's eyeballs so they could see how pretty it is. I highly, highly recommend it. It's really not a movie where you're gonna feel like hopeless walking away from it. It's just really quietly lovely. I think everyone should watch it.
With that said, are you reading anything?
I am reading something. It's called We Band of Angels: The Untold Story of the American Women Trapped on Bataan by Elizabeth N. Norman. Last week I talked about how I was reading a memoir by one of the nurses who was serving in the Philippines at the outbreak of World War II. And this is not a memoir, this is sort of a broader thing about all of the nurses. The memoir I read, the nurse had managed to she was one of the lucky few to escape, whereas a lot of the nurses were not so lucky. They ended up becoming prisoners of war of the Japanese. So yeah, I'm super curious to read more about it. These ladies were absolute badasses, man. They were just doing their job while they were getting bombed and the hospital was being blown apart around them and they were dealing with these incredibly traumatic wounds. They were trying to remain like a center of calm for these guys who had shell shock and would hide under their beds or scream when the bombing started. So yeah, just a really really cool to read about these women and what they went through.
I'm excited to be talking about them soon with you. I'm not reading anything. Well, I am, but I'm reading the same thing I was reading weeks ago, so it's not very interesting currently. I'm sorry, I keep buying new books and not reading any of them in a timely fashion. One day I'll be finished with the book, I promise. And with that, I think we've come to the end of this episode. So I want to thank everybody for listening. You can follow us wherever you get your podcast and rate us 5 stars. You can send this episode to a friend. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. And you can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, for more info. I'll put an interesting document regarding to the demining of Denmark on the website for you all to read. It's very interesting. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.